living in the moment, and the moment is the future.
With Pam and John.
Welcome to SPED Talk with Pam
and John,
also known as The Calm.
before the storm.
Our purpose is to elevate the conversation and amplify special education resources.
And our why is all about the kids. You know, Pam, there are so many organizations and people around Texas who are just making it happen for kids with disabilities.
So let's make this a platform to celebrate their efforts, because special education is about making the impossible possible. Hey, John, we're back in Austin again.
We are back in Austin again. Why are you looking at him? I'm John. I'm over here.
I know,
Come
but
on, Pam.
But I am so excited. I am with one of my favorite people in the world. He doesn't know he's one of my favorite people.
Who we got in the room,
We have
Pam?
Jam Page, the Special Education Director at ESC Region 15,
Yeah, but-
San Texas.
That's right, but that's not the only person in the room with us. Of course, Amy's with us. She always rides shotgun with this group.
Right.
But we also got one of my favorite people, Tammy Utter from Region 15, and she's a field service agent and a AKA SPED Liaison. So guys, we're so glad to have you in. We're here to talk about the Small Rural Schools Network and the conference coming up.
Okay, great. We're happy to be here. Appreciate y'all having us.
So, anytime.
Yeah.
Good stuff. So it's really cool that we came together kind of at the same time here in Austin with directors over here at AIR and with, liaisons at the Moody Bank. And I know it's hard for us to always, find time to be in the same room at the same time around these topics, but this is such important information. And this is just another platform, for getting these resources and this information out to listeners and to stakeholders really around the state. So thank y'all for coming in. Pam and I were talking on the way over about how important it is really to let people know about this network, specifically, because this is a new network. Some of these networks have been around and they're kind of getting repurposed, I guess, shined up and then put back out for everybody. And this is a
I
brand
don't think
new
TA
one.
would like us to say they're
come on.
shined up.
Shined up. Oh, we're shining.
You're
That's all right.
shining.
Shining. You can say it.
Bright and shiny.
But this one's coming out shining right off,
Okay.
right? And so, but yeah, so this is a new one, and I think it's important because our small rural schools really do have a lot of constraints and barriers to, providing services for students with disabilities, and ESCs are so big in supporting
Sure.
those needs. And so, to me, this network is just an extension, prioritization of that.
Right.
So, so specifically, can y'all talk a little bit about the purpose, or the mission even of the Small Rural Schools Network?
Mainly, it's kind of what it sounds like. We realize that our small rural LEAs across the state, they face several different challenges that maybe their larger counterparts don't face, and so we're just trying to help them provide that more equitable level of service and kind of level the playing field and help provide some of those resources that they may be lacking when it comes to providing special ed services for their students.
And some of the challenges they come up against, one in particular is geographical isolation.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them are way far away. I mean, over 100 and something miles away from an urban area or from their ESC.
Yeah.
And so getting into to get training or professional development is difficult.
Sure.
Another real issue is teacher retention.
Mm.
I mean, not just teacher retention, but recruitment.
Yeah.
There's not all people that want to go out and live in a small or a rural school and work in a small school. And so, and that's another big issue. Another thing we found out when we looked at several different reports to kind of just look at the needs of these schools. And one of the things that we discovered when we were looking over the reports were that there's also real difficulty in a lot of them with connectivity,
Right.
with internet connectivity.
Yeah. Oh,
They
yeah.
can't they can't get the internet, or it won't stay up, or it goes down.
Yeah.
So those are just some of the issues that small schools faces, and personnel. Anybody in a small school knows what it's like to have one person doing 4 different jobs, and teaching out of their field for a year, or driving a school bus, or
Yes.
pinch hitting in the lunchroom. I mean, all different things like that. So those are just some of the issues that small rural schools face.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that geographical piece is a big thing that unless you're living that in your schools and you're out there, and a lot of times we don't realize that our state is, when you look at our state, the size of Texas, and you think about the number of LEAs across our state and the campuses spread out like they are, a lot of times we forget that most of our LEAs are kind of small-ish and kind of rural-ish, but really the definition of small and rural, that's a whole different piece when you're 100 miles away from an urban area, or when you're that far away from your ESC or potential supports. And then the connectivity issue that you think, hey, well, there's all these options online. Well, maybe not for us if our internet's not working. And so those are great points. I mean, something that people don't always think about.
Yeah, the connectivity just reminds me when I was working in Region 9 and we were in a small school district, and we were going to be doing a professional development using computers.
Yeah.
But the special ed director had to notify the city to let them know that they will be online.
Oh, wow.
Because of the system they used, the bandwidth for that whole community was relatively small.
Right.
And so it was like, I need to let them know that we'll be using our laptops.
Wow.
And
Make sure no one picks up the phone.
exactly.
Yeah,
It's like that.
Yeah, right.
And it's-
No dollar.
and that was kind of like, it's a real issue.
Yeah.
But because of the bandwidth. So how many schools are classified as small and rural?
Well, according to the TA snapshot data from 2018, 462 of the 1,200 LEAs in Texas were classified as rural, and that's about 38%. And over half of those, about 52%, or 628 districts, had an enrollment of fewer than 1,000 students.
Wow.
Now, that is what the state bases small and rural on. But as Jim and I did some research for this grant, we came up with a definition ourselves of what we see as small and rural.
Right. And so we're hoping to avoid confusion, because what Tammy was just now talking about, those numbers and specifically the numbers of LEAs that are considered or were considered small and rural, they're going to be a little bit different than what this network may be consider small and rural. And so again, hoping to avoid confusion with that. But what we ended up coming up with, and again, a lot of factors came into this. We didn't want to have, for example, looking at what constitutes small. We didn't want to have the number too high, because then that opens up to a lot more LEAs being eligible, which at first sounds great, but then we only have a finite amount of resources and funding available for this. So that would really kind of thin things out. And same thing with rural. Somebody that is 50 miles away from an urban area, they may think, oh, that's a long ways. Yeah. But then we start looking, and I think the furthest one away was 172 miles from their ESC. Right. So they're more rural, so they're going to have less resources available. So again, have more need. So what we ended up coming up with, based on that data that Tammy talked about, that 2018 data, is for this year, we're going to consider a rural LEA one that is 75 or more miles away from their ESC. And we are going to consider a small LEA having 600 or less students K through 12. And that's not SPED students, that's total student enrollment K through 12.
Okay, and so then when you looked at this, just out of curiosity, was this inclusive of school districts and public charter schools?
Yes,
okay.
Yeah, we're trying really, we're making an effort to say LEAs. We're trying not to use it. So when we say LEAs, we are absolutely including charters in the mix there.
Yeah. That's good to know.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so as Jim explained the definitions, you can see that you could be small, or you could be rural, or you could be small and rural. And so the need sort of increases as you are both of those, the possibility of having some really great needs exists.
So schools are maybe prioritized based on whether they're small versus versus small and rural?
Yes, sir. Yeah. Once we do start rolling the programs out and having people apply for funding for the different initiatives that we're going to have as part of the grant, there's going to be a prioritization. And right now we're looking at, highest priority are LEAs that are small and rural.
Mhm.
Then we're going to look at 2 LEAs that are rural. And then 3rd, LEAs that are small. And some people may say, well, why rural ahead of small?
Right.
And so just an example that we may have in Region 21, you may have a very, very small district that has 200 students, but they're 8 miles away from a major metropolitan area.
Mm-hmm.
So they do face some challenges, but the availability of resources there, it's just down the road as long as they can afford it, and they have those resources versus that district or that LEA that has 500 students, but they're 150 miles away from an urban area. And maybe they have more money coming to them to provide services, but it's going to be hard to get somebody possibly to come and provide that evaluation or to provide that therapy. And so that's why we just, decided to look at rural as being a tiny bit higher priority than if they were just small.
Yeah, it makes sense thinking about it that way.
So who makes up the statewide leadership network?
Well, the network has representatives from each of the 20 education service centers. Jam and I are leading the network, but in addition to those network members, we also have an advisory committee, and that's made up of various different people throughout the state. So we kind of divided the state into quadrants, and we visited with, and Jam, chime in here for clarification if you need to, visited with the ESC special ed directors and got suggestions, and they talked to their local SPED directors, got suggestions on who might be good committee members that could step in and give us some input on what it's really like being out there, being out working boots on the ground kinds of things. So
and we really felt that was important. Like John mentioned, this is a brand new network, and so Tammy and I, we did a lot of research, and we had a lot of great input from others and other ESCs. So we think we kind of have an idea of what direction we want this network to go, but we felt very, very strongly that we needed to have input and just a little bit of direction from folks that are currently serving as superintendents and special education directors, both in single member districts and co-ops. Part of that advisory committee is also evaluation personnel. We have speech therapists, LSSP, education diagnostician. We have a principal on there. We have a federal programs director on there. So we really wanted to get as much input from across the state, from a lot of different members that are currently providing SPED services to their small rural students. And so, so that advisory committee, along with the network members, which, as Tammy mentioned, are the 20 small rural schools contacts from the 20 ESCs, make up that large network.
Yeah, it's exciting to think that not only this network is going to be doing this good work out there for all our small and rural schools that qualify, and then potentially, I guess, scaling over time. I guess each year we'll revisit this, and it sounded like when you talked about the equation for small and rural, like that's this year. Is there potential that, depending on funding, may revisit that, may not, that may stick?
Absolutely. There's so many things that could change. But again, that's where we would lean on that network and that advisory committee to, once we get towards the end of this year, hey, what worked, what didn't work? Did we include enough schools? Did we include too many schools? So that is definitely something, again, working with our contact at TEA, absolutely things could change.
So what do you see as the greatest need for delivering special education services in small and rural schools?
I think Tammy hit on them at the beginning. A lot of it is just availability of resources, and in those resources, including staff members. It is that is something that I know so many of our co-ops and our small LEAs, even our larger LEAs, but especially our small and rural LEAs, if they lose a speech therapist, there's not a university just down the road a lot of times.
They're like unicorns.
That's pumping out SLPs.
Right.
Same thing with diagnosticians and LSSPs.
Yeah.
We have been working with some university partners on this, and they shared a map with us. And again, this is a podcast and I can't show it, but it was a map of Texas, and it was broken up by counties, and highlighted were the counties in the state of Texas where there was not one LSSP.
Yes.
And it was amazing to see how many counties you could not find one LSSP. But, so that's just one example. And something else, when we start talking about staff members and geographic isolation, when I started teaching in a larger district, and I taught in a self-contained classroom. If I needed help with something or needed to bounce an idea off somebody, I ran down the hall or I jumped over to the next campus. And I had that great relationship versus somebody else that might be in a self-contained classroom in a co-op. They're the only one.
That's right. Maybe in the county.
In the whole county, in the whole co-op. And so that is absolutely a huge need in our small rural schools.
And a need that has even gotten greater over the past couple of years is the need for evaluation personnel. The corrective action plan that came across the state and the increase in evaluations has really it's been difficult for everyone in the state. Particularly, it's been difficult for small schools and rural schools because they may have one evaluator that does everything, and then they get double the evaluations coming in. It makes it really hard to handle that load and to do it in a timely manner like you are required to do. And so that's one of and maybe we'll talk about it in a minute, the initiatives or the activities of this grant that this grant addresses is the need for evaluation personnel.
So I know we touched on kind of the idea of that speech therapist, the idea of speech, and isn't there a component in this plan, like an activity here where it's tied to, is it a teletherapy type model or? Yes,
there is. In researching for applying for this grant, what we did is we looked at what other states were doing, if they were doing anything similar. Not many were, but a lot of the ones that were, something that we kept seeing was teletherapy, especially for those rural schools. We know that there are vendors in Texas that have started providing and have been providing specifically speech teletherapy for a while. We're starting to see more talks of that with mental health and with some other therapy services. So that is something that we built into this network is opportunities for our small and rural LEAs that have a need to participate in a speech teletherapy pilot. And so once that is ready and gone through all the processes at TEA, we will have those small and rural LEAs that have a need, whatever it is. Maybe they only had one SLP and they retired or had a baby and, so something happened. And so now they're struggling. They would be able to apply for funding to have a vendor provide speech teletherapy. And then with that, we're also going to do a lot of data collection as a network and working along with TEA because we want feedback. We want to know, hey, was this really great? And was one vendor, maybe a little bit more successful in their eyes than another vendor? Because this, again, thinking about down the road, this is something that we could, possibly look at maybe some additional funding for if we see that it's a benefit.
Yeah, I mean, the teletherapies are really growing, I think, in popularity. And I think a lot of times, it's that necessity. When we have a necessity and we have a shortage in areas, we have to be creative in how we find solutions. And it seems like the teletherapies is one of the things that people are finding to be, useful out there. And that, it's really, I think that's why it's so exciting that this network has picked that up specifically, because that's an area where you could scale that as a model statewide over time. And then schools could see the benefit. It's always scary at first.
Right. And that's kind of our hope is maybe there's a special ed director that's been on the fence about participating. And if we can give them opportunity, if there is a need to try it, quote unquote, for free, they may learn that they love it. And that's something that, again, they benefit from it. They talk to their friends and they see, hey, it can work and we can provide great services to our students in this format.
And another one of the activities we'll be doing is partnering with the Student Center Transition Network. And so
That's exciting.
And we're
Yeah.
going to work with Transition with Vicki Mitchell in that group. We'll also be working with Child Find, Evaluation and ARD Supports Network, and the School and Family Engagement Network. And so we will work together as well on how do all these things intersect and interact with each other concerning the lens of small and rural schools.
Yeah, that's powerful. That's powerful that because there's these other networks that are doing great work, and are they thinking about it through that small and rural lens?
Right.
And so that's really neat to hear that there's intentionally going to be collaboration between those networks.
Especially when we look at, employment for students in small and rural schools
Oh,
with
yeah.
that secondary
Absolutely.
transition
Yeah.
network, or even looking at post-school options,
Right.
going to college or going to community college. And a lot of times the issue of transportation, and also the issue of, what is it like to be away from home? Because one thing I realized working in the Region 9 area, going to Wichita Falls was a big deal.
Yes, a real
You know,
big deal.
It was a real big deal.
Yeah.
But anybody who's been to Wichita Falls, no, it's really not a big
Big deal.
deal.
Yeah. But
But
it's perspective.
it's
right?
perspective, exactly.
Yeah.
And when we look at, you talk about schools being 75 miles away from an urban area or a larger city, when you start talking to young people and see how far they've traveled
Yeah.
and realize you have students who never left their counties.
Right. That's right.
And so when we're talking about employment, and if you have communities that don't have jobs, basically, it's drying up because businesses have left those communities, and what's going to happen to that young person?
Mhm.
Or, the fear about leaving home and going to a university or a community
Or
college.
another town for work.
All those
Well,
things.
and
Yeah.
speaking of that, so much of what we want to see with our school age kiddos, especially in high school, is giving them some opportunities for some work experience.
That's right.
In a large
Exactly.
city, there's plenty of businesses
Oh,
to
yeah.
choose from. In a smaller city, they may have a gas station and a church and maybe a little grocery store,
Yeah.
and that's it in their area. And so then it's, do we hop on a bus and try to get over to a larger city to try to give them those work experiences? And so those are some of the things that again, we don't necessarily have the answers, but we're excited to work with the Transition Network and try to come up with some things that are working across the state to try to push out to everybody.
Absolutely. Well, we love Dr. Vicki Mitchell. She
Yeah.
joined
She's
us
amazing.
for the Transitions Network episode. That was super awesome. And this has been really cool. We really appreciate y'all coming on. Before we let you go, because I know how busy everybody gets, but before we let you go, we always like to ask kind of a thoughtful question, of our guests. And Pam, you're giving me the finger. That didn't sound right. But
Wow.
We want to make sure before we let them go, but we also want to make sure they discuss the conferences.
oh, that's right.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
so let's talk
Conference.
about that.
So
Yes.
we're talking about different activities that we're going to be that are going to be part of the network. One thing that is in the works, and actually it is ready to register for, we have 4 small school connections conferences that are scheduled, and we'll give you the dates and the locations. But the thought behind this is, the large schools, the biggest 16 or the biggest districts in the state, they have times where they can get together and they can talk about issues that are specific to them,
Sure.
being very large. And so about 5 years ago, Ben Runyon, hi Ben, if you're listening. He was a director in Region 17, and he said, small schools need something like this
Yeah.
because we have unique challenges, a lot of the ones that we've already talked about. And so he, in working with Region 17, they came up with a Small Schools Connection Conference. And it was just a time that small and rural special ed administrators could get together and get information on topics that they really need information about. And they can get together and they can network. Again, they may be they may be the only special ed director in a long ways.
Oh, yeah.
So that has been very, very successful, and it has grown every year. And so Tammy and I, we wanted to take that one conference that was happening in Lubbock, and we wanted to take it statewide. And so right now we have 4 conferences that are scheduled. The first conference is going to be at Region 20 Education Service Center on November 11th and 12th.
Okay.
Next one is Region 6 at November 18th and 19th
That's in Huntsville.
in Huntsville.
And Region 20 is down in the San Antonio area.
Yes.
Yeah.
Then right after we go to Huntsville, we're going to hop on the highway and head up to Richardson in Region 10.
Hey.
And we will be there at Region 10 ESC November 20th and 21st. And then our last one will be the one that started it all, Region 17 ESC in Lubbock on December 3rd and 4th. And John, I'm not sure how we can get this flyer out.
Yeah.
We pushed the flyer out through the networks, the ESC SPED director. So hopefully some of y'all have already heard about these conferences, but you can attend the one that works best with your schedule. You know, if you're just up the road from Region 20, but those dates don't work for you, but you could go to Region 6 in Huntsville, go to Region 6 in Huntsville.
Yeah.
And again, the target is going to be small and rural school, special ed administrators, but we've had very large LEAs go to this and get a lot of benefit from it. So this is open to anybody and everybody. Registration is free. You'll be well fed for free, thanks to our vendors. You'll just have to, pay to get there and back. And so, yeah, we're very excited about these. Agendas are in the works. Once agendas get finalized, we will push those out to the ESCs, but we're hoping to have great turnout at those small school connection conferences.
That's awesome. I know we'll be at one or two or three or as many as we can attend. But
Great.
And so we'll make sure we attach that flyer with a hyperlink to our episode.
Good deal.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
And looking at your schedule, it's basically a day and a half. So you're not starting the first day until 11 o'clock.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
allowing for drive time.
Sure. Yeah.
That's
We
always
wanted,
great.
basically kind of a 2-day conference
Okay.
almost, but just stay one night. So a
Okay.
little less time away from home.
Right.
And we are going to offer each one via distance learning. However, having said that, we want as many people there as possible
Mhm.
because the biggest piece of this is the networking and the collaboration, which is hard to do via Zoom.
Sure.
But that is going to be an option because, again, with so many of our schools being rural and, it may not be super close to one of those four, we will make that available.
And one of the things taken into consideration, and this wasn't even us, this was our pre-planner being running, the actual schedule of these days took into consideration small and rural schools because they cannot always leave for 2 full days and 2 nights away. But they could get the school running and going and then drive a few hours and be somewhere, spend the night, spend a part of another day and run back.
Yes.
Right. They could do that. And so
Yes.
even that, when in his planning, and we just followed suit to make allowances for the most amount of people
Yeah.
to be there.
Well, I mean, I can see how passionate both of y'all are about this network and about the conferences and really about the opportunities that these networks, I think, are going to provide to our smaller and rural LEAs. This is the point I was trying to get to earlier, Pam.
All right.
I jumped the gun.
I know you jumped the gun as usual.
Share something. Like, we always want to humanize our guests, right? Because I know people hear voices and they hear names a lot of times, but they don't really get a little bit of who this person is. And so we wanted each of you to just take a minute and share something, a connection to this network, to this work, why it is you're so passionate about this network.
Well, I'll start. I'll tell you. I grew up in Paint Creek, Texas.
I know where that is.
And well, if you know where it is, you're among the few. But it is a very tiny community, about 60 miles north of Abilene. It is a community. It doesn't have a post office. It at one time had 2 churches in the school building.
Yep.
And now I think it has 1 church in a school building. That's where I spent my school career, and I loved every single minute of it.
Yeah.
Loved it. And then when I got into teaching, then I've taught almost my entire career, not totally, but almost my entire 30 years have been working in and with small and rural schools.
Yeah.
So I saw up close and personally the difficulties that happen in small schools. But I think even more important than that was that attitude that I'm going to use this word for lack of a different one, that grit that comes with and determination with making it work.
Mhm.
No matter how many, if there's only 6 of us and we've got 8 classes to teach. Well, how are we going to do it?
We
Well,
make do.
Susie's going to come from the whatever.
Yeah.
There's that attitude of we are going to give our kids the very best that
Yes.
we can, no matter what. And I love the thought of being part of something that gets to help do that, gets to help provide resources and training and certifications and therapies to provide those supports to do that.
That's awesome.
It's my heart's desire to see students from small and rural schools succeed, and not only in school, but in life. And I think this grant provides us the unique opportunity to help provide those services. I believe the success of students in rural schools is going to have a lasting impact on the future of Texas. And we owe it to these kids to do whatever is necessary to ensure that they have the same opportunities as students in urban areas.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, I love that. Jim?
Well, I grew up in a town a little bit larger than Paint Creek. I grew up in Breckenridge, Texas, kind of in the same area, a little northeast of Abilene. Went to Angelo State in San Angelo, a smaller university. My teaching career was in a large school district, but then when I went to the service center as an autism behavior consultant, most of the requests I got was to go out and support students that were having a tough time in those small and rural LEAs, oftentimes because they may not have had the support at their LEA that some of the larger districts do. And so just working in a lot of small and rural LEAs in that capacity, and now as a director, most of our 43 LEAs that we serve, they're in part of especially a co-op. And so again, just being really involved in the struggles and the issues that they face being small and rural. When I saw the opportunity to apply for this grant, I just said this is something that myself and Tammy and Region 15 need to be involved in.
Yeah. Well, guys, thank you so much for the time today. This is really, I think, a powerful episode because it touches, I think, each of our lives in many ways, and the work we've done out in our areas of our necks of the woods across Texas. So thank you all for being here, and that's it for SPED Talk.
Thanks for having us. This is great.
We're out.
We're out. All right, guys.
Thank you.
Good job.
Thank y'all.
To continue to elevate the conversation, hit us up on Twitter at SPEDTalk 2020, where you can find links to all of our episodes and each of the resources that we discussed today.
John, also links to the resources will be available at our podcast site.
And if you found these resources helpful, be sure to share them with a friend, because information should always flow through us, not to us.
That will do it for this episode of SPED Talk.
And remember, courage creates culture and kindness keeps us connected.
Until the next time, I'm Pam.
And I've been John.
And this is
SPED Talk.
Living in the moment, and the moment is the future.